Hello and welcome to the first episode of Talking City. I'm James Robson, the Manchester City editor for the Manchester Evening News. With me is Ian Cheeseman, 23 years as BBC Radio Manchester commentator. He's been covering City for around 30 years. You know exactly who he is. He's currently on Forever Blue on XS Manchester on Tuesdays. First of all, it's been a busy summer already, hasn't it? What have you made of City's transfer business so far?
Well, it was obviously what Pep wanted to do. He wanted to bring in pacey, younger fullbacks. He targeted those. Whether he's got everybody he actually wanted is a different question, because we don't know who he was going for and who to believe. But in terms of Mendy, who I saw twice for Monaco in the games against City last season, he has almost a winger, a fullback who is so pacey and actually aggressive, which is what you want, and he's youthful. So last season, where you had fullbacks who perhaps couldn't be seen to play 2 games in a row sometimes, or certainly regularly, because of maybe their age or the type of players that they were, very good actually that they were in the peak, like Gael Clichy, he wasn't suited perhaps to the way that Pep wants to play. Now in Mendy, he's got that type of player. In Kyle Walker, although he's slightly older, he has that type of player. In Danilo, he also has that type of player. So he's now suddenly got 3 options, and you can see him also using Leroy Sané, as we saw perhaps in the Iceland game against West Ham, in almost the left full-back role. And it's something you've got to get your head around, because I think it's going to be very, very different than the way it's been before. You don't think of it as a full-back, you think of it, and do you then label it as a wing-back? I don't know, but you label it as whatever you want to label it as, but it's certainly going to be something very attack-minded, and it looks to me, from the way he set the team up in the early games, that he's going to play with a back 3 quite regularly, and I think he sees John Stones' role, this footballing centre-half, as not being an out-and-out defender, but as being the sort of, dare I say, the Vincent Kompany role, because he did that so effectively in the centre of defence as one of those 3, which allows those full-backs to bomb on. And I think his main transfer targets in the summer, whilst it may or may not have been these 3 individuals, was certainly to strengthen at full-back, and he did that. Now, the new signings, obviously the goalkeeper. There was a big question mark against Claudio Bravo last season, and unfortunately for him, he didn't get off to the best of starts. I don't know whether that affected his confidence. The crowd was still hurting because Joe Hart had gone, who was one of their favourites, and there were certain sections perhaps of the crowd who, I understand why, were sort of almost resistant to Claudio Bravo. So it didn't help him, that. And obviously he was brought in as this footballing goalkeeper who was going to be passing the ball around and almost playing as an extra outfield player. And to put all that pressure on him, I couldn't help thinking at times that he looked at, certain situations in the game and thought, well, I've got to show here that I'm a footballer, and I've got to pick out this pass when a simple one would have done. And maybe he overdid it a bit. That made him even more nervous. That made the crowd nervous. And then it seemed to be an out of control, don't overdo it, but a little bit of an out-of-control spiral that didn't do him any favours.
His big problem was that, he was good with his feet, wasn't he? That's what he was brought in for, but he couldn't save shots. You don't want to be cruel on him, but, the amount of times that he just let in goals that you felt like a keeper of that quality shouldn't be letting in. There were a number of goals that City conceded last year. And yet, you thought Joe Hart would have saved that.
And yet, we know he can save those.
Of course he can. Yeah.
We know he can.
Yeah, he wouldn't be where he's been all these years, would he?
So therefore, you wonder how the psychology of everything affected him, and whether in those exact moments that you're talking about where he should maybe have saved, that he was so aware of that he became very self-aware, that he didn't react in a natural way. So I felt very sorry for him. I think there's still a very good goalkeeper there. But he's brought in a new goalkeeper who I've not seen a lot of. I was on 2 of the games in pre-season in LA and in Houston, and I've watched the other 2 games, of course, on TV. And the one thing that slightly worried me a bit, I'll be honest, at this stage, was he came charging out a little bit too much. But as a goalkeeper, as a shot stopper, he did okay. And with his feet, he did okay. So hopefully he'll get off to a good start, get the crowd behind him. We've now got used to Joe going. We've now accepted that it's going to be somebody else. and hopefully he gets that mojo and that confidence right from the start, and he does look like a keeper with a lot of confidence. He's young, why wouldn't he be confident? And then he can go forward and really grab that role.
He impressed me, I think, more than any other player on tour this summer. And I think, like a lot of people who were at the game in Houston against United, were very worried when you saw him charging out and Lukaku scores that goal, doesn't he? And you thought, oh no, what's that? Guardiola's done it again here. The way he recovered from that in the following games, against Real Madrid, he made a number of really good saves. Likewise against Tottenham. I think the big thing for me was he was so positive. I know, yeah, he charged out and he made that mistake, but a lot of times you talk to defenders and they say they prefer that from a keeper. Yeah, they'll make mistakes, but they know that keeper's going to make a decision, he's going to be decisive, and he showed that, didn't he? What was it? I think it was Dele Alli in the Tottenham game, and he was out on him in a flash. It was a one-on-one, but he was right out on him, wasn't he, and stopped it. And already, I think he's going to breed confidence into that defence in a way that, like you say, Bravo just didn't.
From what I can remember from what Pep said last year, not specifically about this, but you're right, I think he wants a goalkeeper or a player who will have the courage of their convictions and do what he wants them to believe in and what he thinks they're good at. And if that means that sometimes they make a howler, over the course of a season, all right, a player might make 2 howlers, but if at the other end, which we've not got to yet, City are blitzing opposition and scoring goals, and you end up losing 5-2, then that doesn't matter if you've made that howler. Now, of course, in a perfect world, some managers believe that winning 1-0 is the perfect game. You know, you concede no chances, you create that one perfect opportunity, you win 1-0. I have to admit that I was brought up, because I'm getting on now, under Malcolm Allison and Joe Mercer, and Malcolm's philosophy was score more than the opposition.
Yeah.
This guy is, it feels to me, in that mould. I love watching this football that City are playing at the moment. They're not quite there yet, but the manager's trying to get there. And if he does what he wants to do and goes the way I think he's going to go, even though you don't want to see the odd howler will sort of be forgiven because of the bigger picture that you're looking at. And I, for one, have no problems with that.
Now, he's not finished his spending yet. We know that. He wants a striker, which some people might think is incredible when you've got Gabriel Jesus, Sergio Aguero. We don't even know if Sergio Aguero is going to be a regular starter. Do you think Alexis Sanchez will be a City player? Maybe not at the start of the season, because we don't think he'll come for Saturday, but by the end of the transfer window. And do you think Kylian Mbappe will make the move when Real Madrid and PSG want him as well?
$1 million questions.
Well, the $160 million if it's Mbappe.
It's a game of poker, this, isn't it? And at the beginning of the transfer window, which I suppose starts at the end of the previous season, fans are always saying to me, they're going to ask him the same questions. Who are they going to sign? Why don't they bring them in early so that they can settle in? All those questions, which seems all very logical. But when you're talking about these multi-million pound deals, that is what it is. It's a game of poker. So it's who blinks first. So Arsenal, under Arsene Wenger, want to get the highest price that they can possibly get if they resign themselves to the fact that Alexis Sanchez is going. And obviously there may be other people looking from the outside who quite fancy nipping in at the end if they can see that this player wants out and thinking that they're going to get the player. A bit Dani Alves-ish, you might say, at PSG, because it looked to me as if he was nailed on
City
to come to
City.
Well. Yeah, and absolutely he was, wasn't he? And then now we find out that maybe because of the Neymar incident, of him going there and who knows what else, that's why he turned left at the airport rather than right, you know what I mean? So in terms of the blinking first, Arsenal might wait until 2 days to go before the transfer window. City look at them right in the eye and they say, no, we're not going to pay that. And then in the end, they do, or there's a compromise. And it's impossible to actually know what's going to happen in that. Mbappe might be thinking, because we've heard Real Madrid now saying they're not going to move for him for at least a year. Does he then stay another year? But is staying at Monaco now much weaker than they were, because basically City have got all the best players? Do they think, well, he might not have another season like that? And if he loses momentum, does his value drop and do they look somewhere else? Because City were looking at, we think, Aubameyang at Dortmund a year ago, and now they don't seem to be linked with him as much. So has that momentum reflected then in Mbappe, and do they lose momentum in that? So I can't answer the question. Are they going to sign? It does feel to me as if there's going to be at least one.
Yeah.
Wow, and I think both of them would be wow signings. So I think one of those, if not both, could still happen.
All right, you can't answer that. Can you answer this? Do they need another forward?
Yeah.
You know, at the end of last season, Aguero was left out of the team, and we're all thinking, well, he's going to go because Jesus is now the starting centre forward. We still think they need another striker.
Stop thinking, James, and even though you're younger than me, but stop thinking in the old way. People have said to me, and I'm sure we'll discuss this later on, what's the starting 11 going to be?
Yeah.
What's Pep's strongest team? There is no strongest team anymore. There isn't just two strikers. It isn't a case of choosing one or the other or saying those are the two strikers. I believe if City play 60 games this season, that probably no player will play more than 40 of those games. No player. And, because there'll be a Champions League game midweek, and before or after it there might be a Manchester derby or a trip to the Emirates or whatever, there will be no 11. So to say that, and I'm sure that there'll be a lot made of this by the press, that if Aguero misses this particular game or Company misses this particular game, that means he's no longer a first choice. There is no first choices anymore. I just don't believe that.
Do the players accept that? I know that's how Guardiola thinks. It's like, I need a squad of 22, maybe even more than that, so I can challenge for the Champions League, challenge for the Premier League, everything. But do the players think that? Because when Sergio Aguero's left out and in the new camp, he's not happy about it. And how do you make him happy about that?
Well, of course that is the most difficult part of it all, but I do think that modern footballers are now starting to see the bigger picture. If you'd have asked, Nicolas Anelka, when he was at City, how do you feel about being left out of this big game? He would have been furious because he knew that he was probably substantially better than the alternatives that City had at that particular time. And he would expect to play in every game because the mentality was different. Now, City have moved on to a completely different era, have quality throughout, and obviously if they can, and I think they should, add at least one more top quality striker so that there's a permanent rotation. Of course, you can also argue that with injuries and stuff it would happen naturally, but even if they were all fit, that there'd be a natural rotation. That, Nicolas Anelka, yes, he'd be gutted. Sergio Aguero, Gabriel Jesus, or Aubameyang or Mbappe or whoever it might be, would have the conversation with Pep, who I think is a brilliant man manager, and who would then paint this picture of the whole thing. And I think there's you might say I'm being naive by this because it's only my opinion, what do I know, but I think that modern players in this era now understand this better than maybe they did in a previous era.
Well, I think he's going to have to do some convincing because
he needs to convince
me for a start. I'll be asking him every week. But when I look at it, I think Cristiano Ronaldo plays all the time. Messi plays all the time.
Fair point.
And I think Aguero considers himself in that bracket. And when he's been left out for a 19-year-old, I don't think however well Guardiola sugarcoats it, he's not going to be happy. My feelings on Aguero have been, since he was left out of the side at the end of last season, that he would either go this summer, or if he stayed and they got Sanchez or Mbappe, we're going to have a whole season of questions about his future. And I think that's on the table.
Are coming from you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'm just preparing you for what's coming.
Yeah, I get that, but Aguero, look at his age as well now. He might actually think to himself, well, am I capable of playing in every game? Yes, of course, when you highlight the Nou Camp and Barcelona and you say, would he be upset about missing that game? Yes, you're right to highlight that. And you're right that Ronaldo or Messi or now Neymar at PSG isn't going to miss any of those games. But is that the type of side and club that Pep's trying to build, where you've got a superstar? Yes, we think of him as a superstar, Aguero, and he is, because of what he's achieved. But City are not a one-man team. City and the whole. We're going to talk about midfield, no doubt, as well. How do you pick that midfield? There is no. There cannot
come
be.
On to that later.
There can't be any first choices in that midfield. No. So they're all going to have to rotate as well. And I think that's the route City need and want and are right to go down, which is this is not one superstar club like Ronaldo and Messi. This is a team.
Let's move on to Pep Guardiola. He's spent more than £200 million already. If he gets the players he wants, that could exceed £300 million. He had his first trophyless season as a manager last season. Is there any manager in the Premier League under more pressure than him this season?
Before I answer that question, he has spent over 200 million, you're right, but actually a lot of people seem to ignore the amount that's come into the club as well, which is around about 60 million. So actually his net is more like 150 in that sort of area, but that's me being pedantic. That's me being pedantic. He has spent a lot of money, that's the point you're making. The pressure on him, of course, is enormous. The pressure on every Premier League manager is enormous for different reasons. So you could even talk about Stoke and selling players and Mark Hughes. He will be under pressure now to justify not bringing players in or balancing books or whatever it is. Pep has a unique type of pressure because he has been brought in as, I'm sure the owners see him this way, and maybe this isn't an appropriate word, I don't know, but he's sort of the Messiah, isn't he? Mm-hmm. He's been brought in to move this club to the next level, and maybe even a couple more levels up from that. And so therefore, yes, the pressure's on. I don't think anybody puts more pressure on Pep Guardiola than Pep Guardiola does. I think these owners have demonstrated in what they've done since they've come in. I think he's the fourth manager, Pep, that they've had, from the one they inherited and through Mancini and then Pellegrini and on to Pep. And if you look at what they've done previously, it's always felt to me, even when Pellegrini came in, it always felt like it was with Pep in mind. So that puts even more pressure on because it feels like all the eggs are in this basket. I wonder whether the people behind the scenes are thinking, who will the next one be? Now, they might be, and they might be thinking that it's, some of the grooming at the moment. Patrick Vieira, of course, was spoken about at one stage. That there could be other thoughts. But what I'm getting at is that it's all Pep. It seems like it's all Pep. But I honestly think that nobody puts more pressure on him than him. And I think the owners will show an extraordinary amount of patience, if they have to, with Pep. Now, that said, when you saw Mourinho at Chelsea, who was absolute god there, have that really bad start, and obviously the press made a lot of the fact that he'd lost the dressing room or whatever, but whatever the results, let's just look at the facts, were terrible at the beginning of that season. They didn't wait long before they pulled the bullet, pulled the trigger, fired the bullet, and yet the following season, pretty much that team won the league. So you could argue that Chelsea pulled the trigger too quick. Now Pep's got this longer term project, and if Mbappe or Sanchez doesn't come in and City don't dominate in the way that Pep and City want and don't win the league, do you pull the trigger at that point, or does Pep, and he will justify this no doubt, say, well, I still haven't got all of the pieces in place, I need more time. There'll be a section of people, maybe people like you as a journalist, there'll be sections of fans who won't have that patience, and there'll be other sections of fans who say, and other journalists or other people who just observe from the outside who say, of course he should be given that time. And that's the fascinating tension that surrounds any manager really, or any situation. But I think he's under more pressure from himself than he is from the owners, or probably from the fans, although an extreme situation like that Mourinho at Chelsea then puts a different focus on it. But as long as it's not like that, as long as they're in the top four, as long as they're challenging, as long as they're progressing this season and get to the knockout phase of the Champions League, I don't see any knee-jerk panic, firings or anything like that.
I think the club, the owners in Abu Dhabi, absolutely trust him. I think we've seen that this summer with the amount of money they've given him. He's got unprecedented control for a manager at City, hasn't he, since they took over. He's been allowed to build this club in his own image, and you can see that, kind of, like you said, he's changing the face of Manchester City, and they're buying into that, aren't they? But these people are winners, aren't they? And they expect results. And I just wonder, I don't know what would be a minimum for him this season. You would say he needs to win either the Champions League or the Premier League, but only at most two people can do that, can't they? Mm-hmm. And he's got fierce competition for that. I don't think it's quite as simple as if he doesn't win one of those, he'll get sacked. But you would imagine if he didn't win one of those, there would have to be very clear signs that they were very close to, wouldn't they? You know, maybe a Champions League final and second in the Premier League, something like that. But as you say, I think he's very comfortable with the pressure on him, isn't he? But I suppose he can be when you've got the record he's got, because even if he got the boot here, every club in the world would be queuing up for him, wouldn't they?
I don't really want to talk about the other side, but if you look at United and Mourinho and his track record, he has been brought in to win trophies in exactly the way that you're talking about. His teams don't, I would argue, don't really entertain and have never entertained in the way that Pep wants his team to entertain. So therefore it becomes all or nothing with a Jose Mourinho team. So if we were discussing that team, I would say yes, there's enormous pressure on him to win major trophies because of what they've spent. Mm-hmm. I think there's something else about Pep. There is, dare I say it, and it's a horrible word, I know people don't like it, but it's a brand that surrounds him and something that City are trying to create, which is more than just winning trophies. Now, I know ultimately that is how you... I'm not stupid, I'm not naive, but if City play wonderful, awesome football and the crowd are loving it and there is a wow factor in performances and games, and you don't quite make the trophies, to me, that's still a great season. It isn't all about winning trophies. Now, maybe that's because I'm a blue. Yeah. I don't know.
Do the club think that? I get what you're saying about it being a brand. It is a brand. But you're buying into a brand that wins trophies, because that brand has won more trophies than anybody else over that period of time.
City's fans, and I can't speak for them all, and I don't pretend to speak for them all. But through the years I've been going home and away as a fan and as a journalist, I think I have a reasonable handle on what let's say the majority think. And having gone through the difficult times without trophies and come together as a group and really bonded and have a kinship. Now I know there's different generations and others coming through who look at it in a different way, but that's still at the moment the sort of core City fans. I don't think it's all about winning trophies, honestly, I don't. And my understanding, I've never been lucky enough to meet Sheikh Mansour. I've had very brief meetings with Khaldoon, so I can't claim to have the inside knowledge of the way that they think. But if you look at their actions, at the way they've, things like that, which may seem irrelevant, but caring about changing the badge and stuff like that, it feels to me that these are a very gracious, gentlemanly group. I hope I'm right on this. Who believe ethically in trying to create a team that plays the right way, that entertains, and a club that acts in the right way. And so therefore I would hope that the pleasure and entertainment side is as important as the actual putting a little mark on the bedpost that says I won that trophy on that day. And I go along, I buy into that. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, I want to see him win the quadruple this season. It isn't about saying don't want to see a trophy. It's about saying you can get too fixated on that, and actually isn't in any sport. You watch Federer in the Wimbledon final this year, and when it gets to the point where he knows he can win that title that takes him to be the ultimate winner, when he's serving in that final game, he can't do it because he's too tense and too nervous. So if you can create that environment of joy and entertainment, which I think is what Pep and these owners are trying to do, you can express yourself. The second you get to that point where you have to win a game, does that go?
Well, I'm going to fixate on trophies, even if you're not. Do you think he'll win the title this year?
If he gets that extra striker and maybe whoever it is, a Van Dijk or whatever, as a defender, yeah, I do think they'll win the title this year. But
so another £100 million, is what you're saying?
Well, yeah, you're fixating on the money again. It isn't about the money. It's City started from a long way back. I mean, they weren't in the Premier League when all this money came in. So the club isn't structured in the same way. So yes, they're spending more money, but let's also be honest and say that's what every club everywhere does, every league does. Bayern Munich win the German league because they spend the most money. Yeah. But that's life. We are where we are. So yes, he's got to go out and spend a bit more money, and that's why come back on September the 1st, and I'll be a lot more fulsome really in my predictions. But at this stage, we don't know whether Mbappe, whether Sanchez, whether whoever is going to come in. and that could, or at the other clubs as well.
Yeah.
So that could make a big difference.
So, but with this current squad, then, if the business ended now, you wouldn't be as confident about winning the title?
No, I'd still be confident.
Yeah, I think it's probably the strongest squad in the Premier League. Looking at it now.
Yeah, I would agree. Chelsea haven't really strengthened. Certainly Tottenham haven't at this point in time. United have strengthened.
Yeah,
yes.
Maybe similar sort of level. But I've been
not sure about that, but yeah.
I think he's brought in some really good players and addressed areas that were desperate to be fixed.
Yeah, the pace and the youth, particularly at fullback, and we haven't even mentioned Bernardo Silva.
Yeah.
You know, he was dazzling in those two games against City, and when suddenly that name appeared, I thought, wow, yes, fancy him, yeah. So you know, and he's only young, and at some point David Silva will move on, so he could be the heir apparent to that. So no, I agree that City, to me, I've got to say, I tipped Chelsea to win the league last year.
Okay.
And so this year,
did you tip Leicester the year before?
No. So I'll tip City this year.
Now, I think this is going to be the hardest question to answer every week. Now, every week on the Manchester Evening News, we do a team predictor. I think in the last 10 years, I might have got it right once. This season, I don't think we're going to improve on that, looking at the options Guardiola's got. But let's try to pick his first 11 for the first game of the season. We've already discussed this, haven't we? And I think we're struggling to come to a consensus, aren't we? But let's give it a go. I think we can agree on the goalkeeper, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Edison goal.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, my own personal, if you're asking me, first of all, you're very lucky that you've got me sat here today, because last week I was privileged to go into Pep's office.
Oh, right.
And he sat and told me the team he was going to pick for Brighton.
I'll just let you go through then.
So, and obviously if you believe that, you believe anything. I don't think anybody's going to get that sort of information, no matter who claims what. Yeah. So Edison in goal, yes, absolutely. I think he'll pick a back three.
Yeah, we think back three we're going with.
Given what he's done in pre-season.
Yeah.
So therefore that back three sort of picks itself, which is... I know we've discussed this off camera and talked about maybe Company being the player we'd want as the centre of those three, and I agree. I think Company's at his best in the middle. However, I think he'll be the right of those three, although it won't be fixed. You know, they will move around, but I think Company will be the right of the three. John Stones in the middle, Nicholas Otamendi on the left of the three. I think Kyle Walker will start at right back. Now the left back is interesting because he went with Leroy Sané for quite a lot of the game in Iceland.
I think Danilo there.
I think he
looked quite good actually on tour playing that position.
I mean, he's a right-footed player.
He's a right back, isn't he?
Yeah. So but then Glyn Pardo was a right-footed left back. So going really back. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. I'm sure he can do that. So I think that's your five. I do think personally that Yaya will sit in front in this game. It might not be every week, but I think he'll sit in front of that back three. I'd call it a back three rather than a back five, because the other two will push forward so much.
I think Toure now is that first choice holding midfielder this season, which when you look at last season, it's incredible, isn't it? Because he was on his way out, wasn't he, frankly? Yeah. And Fernandinho was being talked of as a future captain of City, wasn't he? But I think the way Toure came back into the team last season, he became absolutely pivotal, didn't he, again? You remembered just what a top player he is, if anyone forgot. I think his greater passing ability put him ahead of Fernandinho for me.
Yeah, that's something that's underestimated by a lot of people. They think back to the Yaya Toure of the charging runs, which was majestic and lovely to watch. But I think that the thing that people overlook a little bit is the very careful threading passing and his retention of possession, which is very big for Pep. And actually, if you analyse a lot of the goals, we talk now about assists and goal scorers. Often the pass before the assist is Yaya. So I think he's quite crucial. Gundogan will come into that role as well, obviously, at some point. And there may be even other ways that you can shift it around.
De Bruyne possibly as well. He likes him there, doesn't he?
Yeah. So, but for this one, for Brighton, if you're pinning me down, I go for Yaya. That means I'm going to go for two strikers. I think he's going to pick Aguero and Jesus. But
that will save a lot of arguments at least. Weren't for the start of the season, but Go on then.
You go against a newly promoted team on their own ground who are going to presumably be buoyed up and really energetic. And I personally think the way to do that for City is to just go at them right from the start, get an early goal, and better to do that with those two rather than have one up front. So then that leaves three behind. I would obviously have Yaya in that central role, which means then you've got De Bruyne and David Silva. Now you know you're going to come back at me and say,
hang on, does that leave three behind?
Three behind, yeah. So I've got the numbers right here. One in goal, three, two on either side.
Yeah.
That leaves you six. One Yaya Toure.
Yeah.
Then
that's 7. And then you've got
8,
2
9,
up front as well.
10, 11.
We've got 12 there.
No.
Three behind the front two.
Yeah.
Oh, you include Yaya in the 3?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So Yaya's sitting there. De Bruyne and Silva are the two very attack-minded support players to Jesus and Aguero. That's what I think he will pick, which means, of course, no Bernardo Silva, no Raheem Sterling, and other players
and
that want them, Fernandinho and Leroy Sané.
So it's around £150 million worth of
there you go,
young players.
Money again. You know, it's a squad game now. It's a squad game.
It is. How do you convince Raheem Sterling and Leroy Sané that this is for the best, that they sit this one out?
Leroy, this is only one game. You may well be playing against Everton. This is no reflection on you. I'm saving you for other games. You know, and you do.
I think you could have a role in Pep's backroom team.
And it'd be true, because you'll see Sané play at left wing back sometimes, and you'll see him play on the left hand side of a 3, or when only one striker plays as one of the 4. So he'll play.
With those wing backs, does that create an issue for the likes of Sané and Sterling? Because of course they're the wide men, aren't they? And if you're going to play wing backs, it is difficult to get those into the team, isn't it?
Maybe, but that's part of the rotation. If Alves had come, then you would have had potentially 3 right backs, you know, and so therefore it would have made it even harder for Raheem Sterling. At left back, obviously Kolarov went quite late on. At the moment, you know, yes, Fernandinho can play there. I've even seen sort of Otamendi drift out a bit to the left, but you don't seem to have that same strength. So I can certainly see Sané, you know, playing that role quite a bit in some of the games.
Yeah, I see that. Is this the year that David Silva is not the guaranteed starter?
None of them are the guaranteed starters.
But Silva always has been, hasn't he?
James, you've got to stop thinking like that.
I can't.
There's no guaranteed starters. The goalkeeper's going to be the nearest to a guaranteed starter, and because I am such a huge Vincent Kompany fan, if he stays fit, he'd be a guaranteed starter for me. But there might not be much else that's guaranteed.
Well, if he's going to play with 3 centre backs, then the 3 centre backs are pretty much, aren't they? That's about just
at the moment
until they bring in Virgil van Dijk
or whoever,
who they're not. We hear they're no longer interested in. To be clear, it's going to be cover they're talking about. Centre back is what they want rather than a marquee name. Is that the right move? Do you think?
Well, mate, yeah, but they won't always play with 3 like that either.
No, if they're playing with 2.
You know, they'll play with 2. But yes, I do think they need top quality centre back. Yeah, still think that. I mean, I know there's question marks against Nicholas Otamendi, and people have said he dives in a bit. I like him. He's an old-fashioned defender. Yes, he's not perfect, but who is? But I quite like him, and obviously I love Vincent Kompany. And John Stones is a different type of player. He's not an out-and-out defender. Now, you can either buy into that and say, yes, he's a libero, you've used that expression, who will bring the ball out, and that might well work in that 3. In a 2, I have to admit that I have slight doubts about John Stones as an out-and-out defender in a 2, but in the 3, maybe that role suits him.
So do you see that back 3 or back 5, however you want to look at it, do you think that is the best way that City can line up with the players Guardiola has, or would you rather say
probably
4?
Yeah. But again, it may be that against a different opposition or in a set of 3 fixtures, one after the other, that you can't just stick to one plan and that you will vary it around a little. But yes, if you only had 1 game to play, if the season was 1 match, then I think that would be the ideal way for this set of players to be structured. But Pep knows better than me.
He does. He's won a lot more trophies than you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I would lean towards 4-3-3, but getting complicated one of those midfielders dropping back into a kind of a 3 to let those wingers.
You know how we've
go
had
on.
this discussion about picking an 11. I'm not sure that when you sit there on day one and you see the team he's picked, the first, and I would do this as well. I'm not saying this is just you, but I would want to write. You would want to write them out in a formation.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't think that formation will even last during the game.
No, it doesn't exist anymore, does it? When they're in possession, it's one. When they're out of possession, it's another.
Yeah,
it's
different
a bit of a
stages of the
nightmare for us,
game.
really,
You're 1-0 up. Then it changes again.
Yeah.
Obviously, the liberal use of substitutes. I know Pep's talked about having more flexibility with substitutes, something he'd like to see changed, and I can see why, because of the way he thinks. So therefore, he has different, phases of games where you have different structures, so different formations.
Well, we'll see if you're right on Saturday. Thanks for joining us today, Ian. Hopefully we'll see a lot more of you this season.
Well, I'm here. I'm here.
It's been brilliant seeing you. Let's just get a final prediction for you, though, on the weekend. What do you think it'll be?
Doing score predictions is something I'm always very reluctant to do, but I'd say I'm very confident that City are going to go to Brighton and ride what I'm sure will be a bit of a way from them, if you pardon the expression, with them being a coastal town. But as a newly promoted club, with a big day for them, and I do wish them well for the season, if they can ride that, which I'm sure they will, City, get that early goal, then I think in the end it might be a relatively comfortable win. Fingers crossed anyway.
I agree, I'm going to go for about 4 or 5.
Well, I'm not going to put a number on it. One would do for me, and play well.